Hi, I'm Kevin Brown. I'm head of marketing for data centers at Schneider Electric, and I've got Rich Whitmore, who's CEO of Motivair, with me today. Rich, thanks for doing this. You've been in the industry a long time, so have I. For years, we've talked about we will build data centers without using chillers or any mechanical cooling. Are we there? Is it possible? Give me your perspective.
Well, good to see you again, Kev. Yeah, I think when we look at chillerless data center design, that's like a utopian state, right? It's the ideal state that we'd love to get to. Um, but we always start the dialogue with the silicon, right? What's happening at the silicon? And the reality is the last several generations of, at least for GPUs, have had more or less the same thermal boundaries. So what's being discussed today isn't really any different than the conversation you and I were having, 10 years ago with respects to, is this possible? I think what it comes down to is a geographic location, right? Where do customers want their data centers? Are they located in a geographic location that can benefit from lots of free cooling, what their risk tolerance is, SLAs inside of whether it's their a customer's own internal data center or through a co-location subcontract, and then reliability of the silicon as well, and what these data centers are running. So you pull all these things together, and you're always striving for the most amount of free cooling that you can get. But in reality, in practice, we see a continued requirement, or at least dependence on some type of mechanical cooling in several geographies.
Well, you talk about SLAs. I mean, when we've looked at this in the past, the service level, what's a typical service level agreement for a data center? Are they allowed any downtime?
It depends on the client. Sometimes it's none, or sometimes it might be just a few hours a year of downtime.
So this partly plays into, because when you do a design of a chiller system and you do a design, part of what plays in is if you're willing to accept some downtime, you actually may be able to achieve greater efficiencies. And ultimately, that's some of the trade-offs that the industry's played with over the years, I think, is how much downtime are you willing to accept? And are people willing to have a service level agreement if I was a customer that, okay, it's okay for my IT data center to be turned off for 5 hours per year?
Yes, and that factors into it. And then the further you want to push that envelope, right? There's always trade-offs in engineering, right? We always say nothing's free, right? There's a trade-off for this or versus that. And so the more you push towards this utopian state of 100% free cooling, the more footprint you need, the bigger space that you need in order to lay out larger equipment to be able to hit those performance points. And so it becomes a trade-off, and there's always some type of limiting factor, right? As I mentioned a few minutes ago, where is the power located? Right? If your power hub and the contract that you have for a gigawatt of power is located in a very warm geographical location, it becomes more difficult not to depend on some mechanical cooling at some point in time. But if a client wants to kind of release those SLAs a little bit and take on a little more risk, then you find this balance point where a chillerless data center could be possible.
So what I hear you saying is it's theoretically possible, but practically speaking, you have to have the ideal climate, the ideal footprint, and the ideal customer in order to make it actually work. And so far, we haven't seen all three of those line up, I think.
Kev, I couldn't say it better myself.
Thanks very much for the time, Rich. Interesting conversation, and I'm sure we'll continue to be having these discussions.
Thanks, Kev. Talk soon.